Please welcome Colleen. Thank you.
Thank you. So welcome everybody. I think this is very wonderful of you all to have secured your babysitting so all you husbands and wives and partners could have your hot date and come here to a parenting seminar. Second thing, thank you for these two men. You make me feel very at home. I've got bookend men in here, a boy at each end. So thank you. Remind me of my two boys. That makes all of you girls in the middle. Third thing, yes, making the comment that, yes, this is what every resilient girl looks like. Independent, strong-willed, creative, stubborn, etc. No, that's not what a resilient girl looks like. We're going to have a look at some general parenting stuff, and then we're going to have a look at what is resilience and where do we get that? How does that happen? How can we promote that? Not just for our daughters, but for ourselves, for everybody. You know, what is this stuff, resilience? I've got 3 short videos, they're only 2 minutes each, that just give us a little bit of an insight into some neuroplastic stuff and brain development. Some of us will know some of this stuff. And then some strategies, a few stats and then some strategies about how to best manage raising our daughters. Was anyone here last year? Great. You guys are going to answer all the curly questions. Thank you for putting your hands up. Yeah, no, I'm not going to do that to you. Okay, raising resilient girls. Does this mean that we want to make them popular? Do we want to make them financially successful? Is this about making sure they get the highest possible marks they can get? Is this what resilience is all about? No. What we want to do is help raise our girls so they can live well, so they can grow and adapt to any circumstance, so they can stand strong with whatever life throws at them. Now, this is the hallmark of good mental health for all of us, for every person in this room, being able to be flexible and adaptable with whatever life throws at us, because we have no control over what's happening tomorrow. Do I tantrum and fall apart? Do I get angry and rage? Or can I bend with the circumstances that they're happening? Now, this is what we want to be teaching our kids, regardless of what they might be encountering and regardless of what we might encounter. How flexible and adaptable would we be as parents in this situation? Now, sometimes it's quite challenging and we can react quite strongly to things like this. Sometimes, though, we take this path of excusing our kids and condoning it and enabling it. Now, there's boundaries to everything, and nothing's rigid. Sometimes we need to understand that kids are exploring their environment, but we also need to be careful not to condone some of this behaviour. So we can go too rigid or too laissez-faire, too easygoing with it. And there's something called the helicopter parent. Now, there's been a lot of literature, helicopter mothers and drone dads. So you're drone dads and you're helicopter mothers. Now, this is talking about the parents who swoop in to protect their kids. If they forget their lunch, you're in the car up there straight away. If they've left their maths assignment at home, you're there dropping it off for them. You're helping them, maybe even doing their big diorama of the Antarctic for them, etc., etc. Now, there's nothing wrong with helping our kids. There's nothing wrong with standing by our kids and being a mentor. There's this funny, blurry line, though, where if I start to take over from my child, there's something really unhealthy that starts to happen in their psyche and their psychological development. We're going to talk about it a little bit later. We start giving our kids the message that they're not capable. We start giving our kids the message that they can't do it, that something's wrong with them. The other thing that we do, if we overprotect our kids, is we steal their opportunity to shine. Now, some of us might be really happy that we got an A+ in that assignment or that we got top marks for that diorama of the Antarctic. But, we don't want to be stealing our kids' opportunity to shine. Now, probably nobody here in this room, some can get caught up in vicariously living through their kids and in vicariously celebrating their child's successes because somehow that reflects on me. It doesn't. So we need to be very careful because this overprotecting, there's a lot being said about it. Now, again, there's a balance. We don't want to abandon our kids. You know, the two things that happen with kids when they're abused, the first one is intentional acts and overprotecting our kids, stealing opportunities to shine, smashing self-esteem is actually a form of abuse. That's a hard thing to say, but it is. And the other extreme is neglect. That's where we don't care at all. We don't even know what homework they've got. So we need to balance this. We don't want to be a helicopter mum or a drone dad. Now, this is interesting. This is just an offshoot of that. You know, back in 1969, back in the 60s, paying out on the child, why haven't you done a good enough job? Sometimes helicopter mums and dads will be paying out on the school or the teacher, why isn't my child succeeding? Obviously, you're doing something wrong. It's not good for the teachers nor the child. Now, and this can be the end product. This is the opposite of resilience. That's why I wanted to put this up here. Because sometimes if we enable our kids and if we spoil our kids or if we do for them what they can do for themselves, then what we then can develop is kids who are quite demanding. You know, in this current generation, it's been labelled the what's in it for me generation. You know, teenagers and young children are the centre of the universe. Mums and dads are there to provide for them and to give them everything that they need. And if you don't, you're a bad parent. And then we can have some tantruming and some demands. And what's the easiest way to stop the tantrum? Give them what they want. And so then we create this horrible vicious cycle which isn't good for anybody. So that's kind of our introduction. That's what we don't want to achieve. So what is this thing called resilience? Resilience has been talked about as being the ability to bounce back from adversity. It's actually more than that. Resilience really is about the ability to be able to bounce forward. You know, studies on family well-being and family strengths. Now, these are massive studies by a guy called Dufresne and his colleague Olson, looking at over 20,000 families around the world. And when families face adversity and crisis, between 70 and 80% of families have said that they're better people because of it, that their family is stronger, wiser, kinder, more productive, more effective, because they've had to face a difficult situation. So resilience is about being able to learn and grow and adapt, because we cannot protect our kids no matter how much bubble wrap we wrap them up in. We can't protect them from stuff that they're going to encounter. Has anybody here never had one single problem in their life? Anybody? If you put your hand up, I'll give you a counselling card, because that's called being delusional. We all face adversity. It's part of life. This is what we want to teach our kids, how they can stand strong. Now, resilience, it's about the capacity to cope with stress and catastrophe. Now, the more we've encountered a difficult situation and learnt how to manage it, that enables us to deal with the next crisis. Now, the first crisis might be not making it into the netball team. The next crisis might be not being invited to that birthday party. If we help our kids to process and resolve, and we'll talk about that, then that enables them to stand strong and not be defeated when things don't work out the way that we would want them to. And those disappointments are hard to deal with, but we can help our kids realise it's not a reflection on their worth or who they are. And that's really important. In our culture, we have this horrible formula for self-esteem, and we're all victim to it. Most of us in this room are driven by this formula for worth that's based on my performance, the marks I get, the job I get, the good job that I do, and what other people think of me. That my worth is based on what you will think of me or what number you might rate me at. It's a horrible formula, and it's not a valid one, it's not solid. So we want to teach our kids to rise above this, the cultural message, to work out and understand their worth in terms of who they are. And so they learn the ability to bounce back, so when they fall over they can stand up, and to learn and grow from adversity. Now, a lot of the research around resilience talks about protective factors, that if we can give our kids enough of this stuff, you know, it all depends on parents and family and education and the school and housing and access to healthcare and a financially secure environment, etc., and a peer network and a second peer network. Our kids need more than one peer network, so that this peer network is giving them a hard time, they've got this peer network that lets them know they're actually okay. So we need to be helping our kids to connect socially. That's really important. So their reflected sense of self isn't just being determined by one peer group or by one parent or by one anybody. Now, we looked at these protective factors and we think, well, that's the formula. We'll just do all of that. We'll throw our kids in a good school, throw them lots of money, have lots of family events, etc. We'll just tick all these boxes, then our kids should be resilient. The problem is it doesn't work. The problem is these things don't secure resilience. So one of the first studies on resilience that was done was in one of the Hawaiian islands. Kauai? I'd love to be a psychologist in Hawaii. What a place to have to work. Anyway, this was a really long longitudinal study from the time kids were born, and it followed through right up until their 40s. Now, these kids were from an impoverished community where family had there was crime and divorce rates and people in jail and drug and alcohol problems and violence. And so the researchers all predicted that these kids were going to crash and burn. They didn't have any of these. They didn't have these protective factors. You know what the results of this study were? That 1/3 of these kids did crash and burn. 1/3 did crash and burn. And there was, I think, 600 and something kids in the study. The other 2/3 actually rose above. The other 2/3 rose above. And what they found was 1/3 actually did amazingly well. And the other third, just average, good citizen. By the time they were in their 30s, the other third had risen above. By the time they were in their 30s to 40s, they were all employed and nobody was in jail. They all had jobs, nobody was in jail. Now the researchers were, they didn't have these protective factors. If these things are supposed to be what makes the difference, but they don't, then what are the core things? So they asked all of the young people, what were the things that made the difference for you because you didn't have these? Now, this is interesting. Typically, there's 3 things. The first one that they said was that they had to have, that people said God. That's what they actually wrote, was God, but psychologists don't like that. So they expanded that. People had to put more words to it. And they talked about meaning and purpose and identity. I'm not a mistake. I'm here for a reason. I'm worth something. Now that comes from community, that comes from interacting with people, but it's a sense of I'm here for a reason. I might not be like you, I might not be very good at maths, I might not be able to swim, but I'm still here for a reason. Somehow these kids were able to carve out who they were instead of trying to be like somebody else. Instead of trying to be like that movie star or that pop idol or whoever it might be. And they were possibly fairly isolated from that. But the first thing they said was God, a sense of meaning, purpose and identity. There's some of us here in this room who are struggling to work out what that is for ourselves. It's really core to understand that not one person in this room is a mistake, not one person. I believe every single person is created with purpose and identity and value, everybody. And that's how I work with the people in my practice. Every single person who walks in my room is unique, created with purpose. The second thing that people need to have was at least one person in their life who believed in them. Now, typically, that would be mum and or dad. For the people in this study, it was very rarely mum or dad, because mum and dad were either working massive hours to scratch a living together just to pay rent and buy food, or mum or dad were absent, single-parent families, or one of the parents were in jail or somewhere else. So the second point, we need at least one person in our life who looks at us and says, I believe in you. You're worth it. You can do this. I know you can. Now, part of the problem for parents, we get so frustrated with our kids. What do you think you're doing? Oh, that is so stupid. What made you do that? I can't believe this is what you're doing. We give the opposite of that message. Instead of giving validation, we need to give good guidance and direction. I'm not saying don't do that, but we can do it without rolling our eyes and with a metaphorical slap of contempt. Because our message as parents is very potent for our kids. So in this study, the first thing people need was God, a sense of purpose. I'm not a mistake. I'm not just floating around in a sea of nothingness. The second thing is someone who it's not just about loving, because these kids said, People like, and it wasn't psychologists either or counsellors. They said, the sports coach, my second-class teacher, the guy who worked in the corner shop. People in their life they'd encountered who just, I believe in you. I think you can do it. Now the power of that's immeasurable. As parents, we need to focus on that as well as training up for the stuff where our kids make mistakes. The third thing that we need to build resilience, all the protective factors in the world, without this third element, come to nothing. For every person in this room, we all need this third element so we can build resilience, the ability to withstand adversity and cope when life gets difficult. The third thing that we have to have in our life is adversity. We have to learn how to deal with difficulty. So it's really important that we don't save our kids from everything, because this is a good time for them to be struggling and problem solving and work out how to deal with life and issues, so that by the time they launch as adults, they have these skills. Now it can seem a little bit hard, but it isn't. We don't abandon our kids, but they need to have the opportunity to problem solve. I don't just mean maths, I mean relational, complex, interactive difficulties that they can process how to manage that. Now, so the three, if we're going to look at protective factors, there's probably the three main ones would be parents and families and community. Now, these are the messages that are the most dominant for our kids. The parent factor. You know, this is a great Bible verse, that if you train up your child in the way they should go, then they won't depart from it. What do you think that means? People who were here last year, you know the answer to this. It's easy to think that training up is like giving instruction and sitting down and having those parent meetings and those family gatherings, and where Dad, I don't know if anyone here ever watched the Brady Bunch. I was too young. Like, people just told me about it. You know, where Father Brady, I forget his name, is giving those family lectures. You know, we think that that's training up. Guess what it isn't? Did you know? About 10% of what you say influences somebody's behaviour. You know the other 90%? Communication, the most potent form of communication, non-verbal communication. So here's the thing. Every move you make, every step you take, your kids are watching you. They're watching how you respond in the traffic. They're watching what happens when you run late. They're watching how you react when Aunt Bertha drops in unexpectedly. They're watching what happens when Mum and Dad are having a disagreement, when the waiter doesn't bring something they're supposed to do, when they buy something from the shop and it doesn't work. They're watching. That's how we're training up our kids. That's how we're training up our kids. The best tool that you have to train your kids is you, and it's who you are and how you live your life. Who you are and how you live your life. Much more potent than any eloquent speech you're going to give your kids, because they're watching you. To know your girls are watching the mums to see how to behave as a woman and what's okay to put up with. You know, if Dad's yelling and angry, okay, Mum puts up with that, so that's okay to do. You know, and they're looking at the dads to see, oh, this is what I should expect from a man. And so hopefully we're having loving, caring dads, so that's what I should expect. But if our little girls are having cranky, absent, aggressive, whatever it might be, dads, we're also teaching our little girls this is what you put up with in a partner, or what you expect from a partner. So the messages are very powerful. None of us is perfect, so we're also teaching our kids that they're not perfect, we're not perfect, but hopefully mums and dads, our kids are seeing how we reconcile and make peace and say sorry and solve arguments and deal with life, so that kids can see everybody makes mistakes and we work it out. Your kids are absorbing, they're downloading, uploading, whichever one it is, all the data about how to be a human being significantly from mum and dad. The second most potent one is family. Now, family plays a really important role because it's our first social group. It's all sorts of different families, and the good news is if you're a single parent family or a sibling raising siblings, or a nana and grandpa raising kids, or adopted families, foster families, etc., 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 the form of the family isn't the key thing. It's what happens in that family. So there's many different ways a family can be organised. It's what happens in the family. It's how we treat our kids. It's not what it looks like, sorry. So I have talked about this last year, but I'm going to whip through it just so that you're also aware part of what you're having to deal with. Family life cycle, there's about 6 stages. It's very loose in this description. So we've got the first stage, is that limerence stage, is when couples get together. We probably don't have any engaged couples here. Anyone engaged? Anyone about to get married? Oh, well then hopefully we can remember back to when it was like this, back in the day. Second stage is when we have kids. Third stage, they go to primary school. Fourth stage, now they're all in high school. Fifth stage, they finally leave home. Sixth, then I get old and die. Like, that's our life cycle. So let's have a look. Which one do you think is the most stressful for parents? Which stage? Number 4? Hey, have you got teenagers? Yes, people often say it's the stage I'm in, that's the most stressful. Anyone else? What do you reckon? 2? 6? Oh, 6? No, party central. Now you don't have to worry about babysitting and kids. You can, although we're all a bit too tired and I can't be bothered going out and doing that stuff now. It's actually number 2. Sorry? Absolutely. It's very general. But stage 2 is an exponential spike. Clinically, it's when the most divorces happen. It's when the most affairs happen. It's when the most relationships breakups happen. And it's when couples are most likely to come to counselling. It's a massive spike. Why is that? Why is that? These cute little tiny babies? Hopefully we're more resilient in primary school and adolescence because we've had all the adversity from our toddlers, so that's helped us to get strong. Look, and there's something in that. Let's have a look then at stage number 1. This is back, and hopefully some of us can remember. We have this limerent experience. It's like these chemicals that pump through our body. It's very similar to a hit of an amphetamine. We're also floating on a cloud. You've met your one true love, and no one has a love like ours. And you're writing their name everywhere, and you're just thinking about them all the time. Think, that slow motion running into each other's arms across a grassy field. Oh, no one has a love like us. Now, it's called limerence, and it is chemical, and we feel like that. It's pair bonding to the extreme. Does anyone here remember that? Hopefully you've had that. Now, the sad news is, for all of you going, it didn't last very long. Well, it doesn't. It lasts about 18 months. What? 18 months? What? Now, for most of us, by 18 months, we've got married, we've moved in, we've made commitments, and then this limerence starts draining out of our toes, and it's like the scales fall off my eyes and I see my partner for the first time, as they really are. What can we do to make it better? Let's have babies. Then everything will be happy. Now, it's what you said, the basis of postnatal depression. For some of us, yes, there's chemical and hormonal stuff, except dads get postnatal depression too. So there's more to it than just the chemicals in our body. It's the massive change. I've had 5 kids. I'm a psychologist. I thought I was ready to have kids. First baby. Oh my goodness, what a shock to the system. Was anyone here fully prepared when you had a baby? No one had any shock. It was like a walk in the park. You knew exactly what was coming. It's a catastrophic life change. Plus, you hit the ground running, sleep deprived, body sagging, doing stuff it didn't used to do, and the baby just won't stop crying, and you can never get everything done. You've loss of income, loss of career, loss of purpose. This is the basis of some of this postnatal depression that we have. And we're hoping, I like this cartoon. How's your new baby? Wonderful, but the lack of sleep is taking a toll on my body. How's Becky doing? I am Becky. Bob looks worse. Now, this is just part of the stress that we go through. It's incredibly draining and stressful. And we need to be aware that in this stage, mums and dads, you're going to be arguing more than you have before. And we need to come together on that. We need to not blame the other person because they didn't clean up, or all he ever wants is sex, or it's your turn to get the baby, or whatever the arguments are. You're in the trenches together. And then our kids grow up and go to school, and by then most of us have realised there's no going back. We've been waiting for normal to come back, but now we know this is the new normal. Like, we're committed and we're stuck with it. Now, primary school is a little bit different. We start being the social taxi. You know, we're driving our kids to soccer, swimming, sport, netball, drama, play dates, everything else. So we're getting very involved in some of their social activity. Our kids then go to high school. You know, in Australia, about 10% of our teenagers get into trouble. About 10%. About 90% of our adolescents do just fine. Doesn't mean that they're going to be polite or clean their room or not be obnoxious or push boundaries. But then most of them aren't going to go to jail or prostitute or sell drugs. A small percentage of our kids fall off the rails. But the vast majority of our kids do okay. Part of the problem that happens for us when we're raising teenagers, it's around the same time that our own parents are getting a bit older. And so now our teens are wanting some independence, and that's really hard because the world is a scary place. But now our own parents or relatives they're becoming more dependent on us. So for mums and dads, we're being stretched at this stage. Plus, we see our beautiful daughters and our handsome sons, and we think, oh, that used to be me. What happened? So we have, our own little version of that midlife crisis. It's not really a crisis thing, but, it's quite challenging as we stocktake. And we realise, whoa, I am getting a little bit old. My son can beat me at the arm wrestle. Some of that challenge starts to happen. Then our kids leave home. In Australia, they're leaving home later and later, and when they do leave, they come back with the partner and the dog because it's so expensive to live outside out there. But what's the average age of leaving home in Australia? Around 30-ish. I know. Oh my goodness. You need to sell up, buy a one-bedroom unit, and don't tell your kids where you are. Look, the problem though, even though our kids are still at home, they're still emotionally leaving. They're still emotionally leaving, probably in their early 20s. We know that brain development finishes around 24, but our kids are needing to separate out to form their identity. So sometimes it's going to feel like you're running a motel because sometimes you're running a motel because there's significant peer groups are out there. The people and it doesn't mean they're bad peer groups, but they're referencing with their peer groups or with their boss or with their university friends, like they're touching base with other people. And that's part of normal, healthy development. So that's our family stuff. We need to maintain good ritual with our families. Our kids really need time with us. One of the big things that's important with families, and I hear this a lot from dads, is that they'll leave the babies up to mum, and then we'll start connecting when they're talking or when they're at school or whatever time frame they're putting on their children. Neural networks, little brains start growing in utero, and brains grow in the context of other. Brains are social organs. So this is one of the clips we're going to look at. Brains, to start cabling up. Dads, you want to be in the blueprint of your child's brain. And mum, you want to be in the blueprint of your child's brain. Now, I know some folk have nannies for all sorts of, very genuine and good reasons. But mums and dads, if you want to be significant in your child's life, you need to have physical contact, time and place. Skyping, nah. Texting, nah. Emails, nah. Still do all of those things, but you need to have every day face-to-face time with your kids. In Australia, we're having less and less family meals together. That's kind of becoming an old-fashioned thing to do because everyone's out doing sport and soccer and parenting seminars and all sorts of things that are taking us away from family. So we really have to prioritise that because our kids need us. They really need our presence. All right, then. So this cohesion, the hallmark of strong family, if we want to build this resilience and help our kids to be strong, we need to have cohesion. We need to have families that are an us. We need a family unit, an identity. This is the way we do things. This is our family. Part of that cohesion is having meals together, hanging out together, birthdays together, holidays together, playing board games together, just talking together, walking the dog together. We need to have a sense of connection. We also need to be flexible. One of the things that we can do that alienates our kids is being rigid about what they should be doing or how they should do their work or who their friends should be. We have to teach our kids to have some flexibility. So we need to have arms that are big enough to embrace difference because your kids are going to have different likes and dislikes to you. And the last thing that we need is good communication. Now, as I said, communication takes time. In Australia, we've got a 40% drop in empathy. In the Western world. There's a 40% drop in our empathy rates. Now, empathy is all around love and caring and tuning into other. Empathy is kind of the building blocks of human relationship. Empathy is how I connect with you. In fact, when we look at our brains, in the front of our brain here, we've got there's a particular grouping of neurons, and they're in cortical stacks of 6 layers. These are called our mirror neurons, and what they do is I upload you into my brain. I have a felt sense of you and what that must be like for you and how you're feeling. It's a little bit that intuitive stuff that a baby has. As an adult, the more we practice this, that helps me, and I practice by being in relationship, I can attune into other. And it helps me to develop tolerance and love and understanding for other people. Now, here's the thing. The only way we can develop empathy is having a face-to-face, real time and place conversation with people. We can't do it on the internet. We can't do it over Skype. We can't do it on Facebook. And so part of the concern about our shrinking levels of empathy is that we're actually having less face-to-face time with one another. And that's a scary thing, because if we forget how to love and if we forget how to care, that doesn't look good for any of us. So we need to invest time with our kids. So communication is really important. There's a whole lot of other things to say. I'll tell you one thing about communication, because I think it's quite funny. It's from my life, and I'm sure I shared it last year, but I'll tell you again. Communication's really hard. As parents, we think we give our kids good instruction and then they're just naughty and disobedient. In good communication, we know that the meaning of the message is in the ears of the receiver. So whatever you say to your children, you need to say, could you tell me back what I just said to you? Because if you just say, so do you understand what I just said? Yes, that gives you no information. We need to be checking that our kids are tuned in and understanding. This is an example from my family. As our kids were growing up, we've always given them age-appropriate bits of, sex education information as they ask. So we've never done the great big scary, come in here for a private talk about sex. So as they're growing up, they would ask and we would tell them. By the time our youngest son was 8, we were driving home in the car one day, and he's in the front seat with me, 3 daughters in the back. Other son wasn't there. Out of the blue, Nathan at 8 says, "Mum, what's a virgin?" Now the 3 girls in the back groaning, "No, please, not this talk again, Mum, no." So Nathan at 8, what does he say? "Oh yeah, tell me, what's a virgin? Ooh, this must be good." So I launch into this very eloquent, clear, educational talk about what a virgin is. The 3 girls groaning in the background all the time. At the end of my wonderful speech, Nathan turns to me and says, "So, Mum, are you a virgin?" To which the girls, "Good talk, Mum, really good talk." So communication is not as easy as what we think it is. We really need to double check with our kids that they're understanding, because their little brains are trying to work the world out. They don't have all the information yet. No matter how clever you think your kids are, they can only be up to their brain stage development. At 5, they don't have the brain capacity of a 25-year-old. They don't. They're not your equal opponent when you're having a head-to-head about eating your vegetables. And sometimes it feels like they've got all the power and they're doing it on purpose. It's not true. We have the power. We do. Okay, the other one that we're dealing with, so we're talking about parents, the influence that we have, family, really big, but the big juggernaut that we're fighting is culture, community, bigger context. We want our community to be a supportive environment. So we need to help our kids get into the right communities. One of the protective factors that they talk about is faith-based groups or youth groups or sporting groups. We need to monitor and manage that. And those sort of groups act as that second peer group. But culture is like a juggernaut, tsunami wave with our kids. We're facing this as well as adults. Even Madonna wishes she could look like that. Even Madonna doesn't look like that. And yet our girls are seeing all this information about what they're supposed to look like. Anorexia now, girls as young as 8 are being hospitalised for anorexia. You can buy bras for babies, those little crop-toppy bra things for babies. Why are we sexualising our girls? They're saying that 14 is now the new 18. And the girls as 10, 11 years old, rather than worrying about who they're going to go and play with, they're worrying about how they look before they go out with all their friends, and a bit of lippy and a bit of nail polish. You know, we have to fight this for our girls, that they're learning that their value and worth is on all of these superficial things rather than who they are. Remember that resilient stuff? The first thing, meaning, purpose, value, worth. That's what we want to help our kids to have. Not particularly for our girls. You know, our culture trades in sex and sexualised objects. You know, we don't want to be teaching our girls that they only have their worth in their appearance. I see so many girls, and this is a really sad reality, from across the socioeconomic spectrum who are being coerced to have sex at school or in parks, or because if you want to go out with this boy, then you'll do that. Otherwise, he'll drop you and he'll go with someone else. Now, I'm seeing a lot of girls, you know, getting caught up on weekends and in some schools, you know, oral sex so they can be popular, even though they don't like it. Now, they come to counselling. They cannot tell their parents. They just can't tell their parents because they hardly ever see their parents. And mum and dad really don't have time. And you know, the eyes glaze over when our kids start talking about, and they took my pencil and they wouldn't give it back. And then the teacher said that I just had to be quiet. You know, some of the kids' issues can seem a little bit boring. But you know, trauma is whatever trauma is to that person. And if that's a trauma for your 5-year-old that someone's taken their pencils, then we need to let them know that we're worth it and we care about that and we want to listen and help them work it out. So I'm seeing these girls, you know, they're 13, 14, not being able to talk to their parents or tell them what's going on because they've lost that connection. The very best thing we can do for our kids is maintain communication. It can save their life. It can save them from making bad life choices. So in the culture, we need to have these conversations from when they're little. Make time with our kids, mums and dads. You know, our kids need mothers who are around to give them good advice. You know, in our culture now, I think we're seeing something like 80% less contact with older women. Like all of that family stuff is breaking down, the wise grandma and the aunts and the uncles. We're having less of that sort of contact with older, wiser people. So we need to make sure we're communicating from when they're little. Good time to talk. Oh, and Britney Spears, just another one. And so, you know, you're not a sketch. This thing about anorexia. Anorexia is rising and it's affecting boys as well. But it's really hard for little girls because along with anorexia, when they're not feeling good about who they are, we're seeing a rise in things like self-abuse as well. When I was a child, self-harm, it just wasn't a very common thing. I don't even know if it happened. It's very popular now. It's a very popular way of connecting and getting attention. And so we need to be having good connection and good attention giving with our kids before they feel the need. If you see a scratch, if I ever see anyone with a scratch, a burn, a mark, I always ask, what's that about? You know, and sometimes our girls are going to cut in places that we don't, you know, on tops of legs, on their backs, in between their toes, you know, under their tongue. We need to be very vigilant with our kids. And if you see even the tiniest little anything, let's name it, let's talk about it. And hopefully that's none of our girls. But things like self-harm are on the rise. There's more and more of it happening. Okay, now we're going to talk about some mental health, just to bring it home about why we need to be putting all this effort into our little darling daughters. We know that the incidence of this is Australian Mental Health Study 2007, so it's possibly the stats are even bigger than this now. But the incidence of mental health disorders in young people is on the rise. Now, and this isn't just because we're better at assessing. You know, that's been factored in. But mental health issues seem to be on the rise. And they're getting younger and younger. Now, some of that's because we're recognising that even young people can have mental health issues. But here's the thing. When we're looking at the prevalence of mental health across Australia, some of the research now is saying that up to 80% of mental health problems in adults, up to 80%, so not all, but a pretty big chunk of mental health problems they have an experience of childhood trauma. So there's massive research looking at the experience of young children, the impact that has on life trajectory. So we need to be very mindful of that But, we've got to protect our kids. I'm not saying any of us would be intentionally abusing our kids, but it's just an interesting new area of research that people are looking at. So when people have mental health problems, many of them have significant childhood trauma. 14% of Australian kids, this is 2007, 14% of Australian kids have aged 4 to 17 have significant mental health problems. That's massive. Ages 4 to 17, our kids are struggling. The age of onset. ADHD, Australia's probably one of the most overprescribed in the Western world of ADHD. So rather than the numbers, what we're seeing, though, it's being identified from ages 7 to 9 is where it's starting. And we know things like conduct disorder and oppositional defiance disorder, that's starting around age 9, and for some kids even younger. We know the anxiety disorders. For some kids, it's very young. But we're seeing, around 7 to 14. The earlier the onset, the harder it is to treat, the more entrenched it is. So if kids are having any of these sorts of issues, we need to get them to see someone straight away. And we'll talk more about the parenting stuff rather than the intervention from outsiders. But there's a lot of this stuff happening. How can we help our kids to be resilient in the face of all of this that they have to be dealing with? Oh, some more stats. But it's talking about teenagers that have the biggest mental health issues in Australia. Half of all lifetime issues of mental illness begin by age 14. 3/4 by 24. Half by age 14. And suicide, the leading cause of death for 50. Aren't these happy statistics? Woo. Oh, gender differences. This one's interesting. In Australia, we know that women have higher rates of depression and anxiety than men. These are the big trifecta. Women have higher rates of depression and anxiety than men. And as a clinical psychologist, I can tell you the research-driven findings of why that is. Would you like to know why women in Australia have higher rates of depression and anxiety than men? And write this down. It's really important. Take it home. It's because of all the men in our life. That's why we have higher rates of depression and anxiety. No, I'm just kidding. Part of the issue, though, is the cultural expectations and the demands. A woman has to have it all, and that's what we're teaching our kids. They've got to have it all, the job, the career, the family, and women get to be the nurturers and the caretakers and the keeper of the birthdays and organising the social events and Christmas and buy the presents and make sure the school notes are done and get everyone to netball and bake the cakes and the sausage sizzle, la 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 la. So we're training up our girls for them also to be doing everything. Like that's their lot in life. Men, you have more drug and alcohol problems than we do. Why is that? It's not because of the women in your life. That is not the reason. Okay, let's have a look then at some of this neuroplastic stuff. Some of us know about neuroplasticity. It's really hit the stage since about the 1990s in America. The 1990s was the decade of the brain. So we started learning a lot more about it. The government over there pumped billions of dollars into this research. It's really interesting, and it does impact, or it should impact, how we parent our kids. We've got two halves to our brain. It's like we've got two brains in our head, connected with the corpus callosum. Now, what we know is that the left brain is more about our logic and the right brain is more about our feelings and emotions. So the right brain is more that intuitive feeling stuff. And we're going to talk about how to manage this in our kids. And what's really interesting, when our kids are babies, the right hemisphere is actually just a little bit bigger than the left hemisphere because the left hemisphere hasn't come online yet. The right hemisphere is how a baby knows when to cry, a baby knows how to be cute to get you to pick it up. A baby knows, it's all this intuitive, who's a safe person, who isn't. And next time you're seeing a baby crawling, now just watch for this. And you've probably noticed it anyway. So as the baby's crawling, you'll see the right head it just tilts a little bit to the side because, gotcha, that doesn't happen. No, the right hemisphere is slightly bigger, but it's not that much bigger. What happens with the left hemisphere when that comes online, that's your first memory. So when you can think back to your first cognitive memory, that's when your left brain and right brain actually connected. So it's, the Terminator movies when Skynet became self-aware. That's what happens in all of our brains. So our first memory way back then is when our little brain starts growing. Now we have, I want to show you this. I just want to show you a couple of clips. We've got about 100 billion brain cells. They don't really change that much throughout our whole life, but what does change is all the cabling, how they get connected. Every experience that we have starts growing little cables. So little dendrites grow and we form all these little connections in our head. Every experience that we have starts shaping brain architecture. We have these amazing brains that no matter what, it's like it's a blank slate when we're born. No matter what environment a child is put into, their brains adapt. Whether they're growing up in New Guinea highlands or in Antarctica or in Sydney or wherever they're growing in the desert, our brains can adapt because they're plastic and they adjust to the environment where the child is. They'll adjust to your family. They'll adjust to your tolerance or your intolerance. They'll adjust to your abuse or your love. Our babies' brains are able to adapt and adjust to what's happening. I've got 3 short clips. Let's have a look at one, then we'll stop. The second one, then we'll stop, and then the third one.
A child's experiences during the earliest years of life have a lasting impact on the architecture of the developing brain. Genes provide the basic blueprint, but experiences shape the process that determines whether a child's brain will provide a strong or weak foundation for all future learning, behavior, and health. During this important period of brain development, billions of brain cells called neurons send electrical signals to communicate with each other. These connections form circuits that become the basic foundation of brain architecture. Circuits and connections proliferate at a rapid pace and are reinforced through repeated use. Our experiences and environment dictate which circuits and connections get more use. Connections that are used more grow stronger and more permanent. Meanwhile, connections that are used less fade away through a normal process called pruning. Well-used circuits create lightning-fast pathways for neural signals to travel across regions of the brain. Simple circuits form first, providing a foundation for more complex circuits to build on later. Through this process, neurons form strong circuits and connections for emotions, motor skills, behavioral control, logic, language, and memory during the early critical period of development. With repeated use, these circuits become more efficient and connect to other areas of the brain more rapidly. While they originate in specific areas of the brain, the circuits are interconnected. You can't have one type of skill without the others to support it. Like building a house, everything is connected, and what comes first forms a foundation for all that comes later.
Okay, what I want you to do is turn to the person next to you and just tell them what's the main thing that you got out of that clip, and then you're going to tell me. Because this isn't going to be, I'm not just going to let you sit there and la la la. The main thing that you got out of that. Person next to you. Okay, let's come back. So we've got 3 clips. So this is the first one. What's the core message of this one? Don't be shy. Have another baby and start again. No. No. That's what I tried. I've got 5. It didn't work. No, just kidding. Apart from that, what's the message? Yes, it's really, really important. We need to be as present as we can with our kids. All this early stuff is really important. But no, the good news is we have plastic brains, so we actually can change. But this foundational circuitry, it's amazing. It goes in cycles. So the way the brain works is we have this massive proliferation of circuits, and then after 3 years it prunes. And then there's another massive, so you get a few chances. You know, the brain grows and then it shrinks, and it grows and then it shrinks. In adolescence is kind of the last big pruning, and that's why our teenagers seem to just really melt down, because their brains literally are having massive pruning of circuits right here in the prefrontal cortex. So no, you get a few chances, so it's all good. Okay, so foundation is really important. You know that long-term repeated behaviour can cause lifelong neurological change. So the more we keep doing something, sounds like an addictive behaviour. Like we have addictive brains. We get addicted to heroin and alcohol and talking and walking and playing the piano. Like, we have brains, the more we do something, that's how we learn. And it's the same for this implicit learning that happens when it's right brain. It's actually quite challenging to deal with when someone's pre-verbal, if there's trauma, because they don't have left brain logic and words to talk about it. So we need to be keeping our kids safe when they're little, but sometimes there's going to be difficulties that we need to manage in different ways. Okay, so we've got early circuits and kids are learning. One of the kids from our primary school, his parents were separated and he was having quite a troubled upbringing. So he became friends with our kids and he'd often come to our house and tried to connect with Mum, but she was often drunk. And so Alan would come to our house quite a lot and have meals. And I remember one mealtime, he was sitting at the table with us and I just reached over just to grab the sauce. And his instant reaction was to do this. So it's some of that implicit learning that's not even intentional. So kids learn all sorts of things. So the foundational stuff lays a blueprint, but it's not locked in. We can change. Change is easier. At the age of around 9, a child's brain is working twice the speed of ours. By the time they're 18, it's about as fast as it's going to be. That's why it's easier to learn things when we're young. That's why kids can learn languages and piano without really trying, because their brain is working really quickly. Now, it needs to settle down, otherwise we'll forget how to walk and we'll forget how to talk. And we need our brains to be plastic but pretty solid, which means as adults we can all change as well. But it takes effort. It takes about 4 months to grow 0.7 of a millimetre of a dendrite in our brain. It takes about 2 years to consolidate that. So if you want to change something in your life, you have to be committed. You know, if you want to learn piano, if you want to do any new activity. Okay, the second clip.
The key to forming strong brain architecture is what's known as serve and return interaction with adults. In this developmental game, new neural connections form in the brain as young children instinctively serve through babbling, facial expressions, and gestures. And adults return the serve, responding in a very directed, meaningful way. It starts very early in life, when a baby coos and the adult interacts and directs the baby's attention to a face or hand. This interaction forms the foundation of brain architecture upon which all future development will be built. It helps create neural connections between all the different areas of the brain, building the emotional and cognitive skills children need in life. For example, here's how it works for literacy and language skills. When the baby sees an object, the adult says its name. This makes connections in the baby's brain between particular sounds and their corresponding objects. Later, adults show young children that those objects and sounds can also be represented by marks on a page. With continued support from adults, children then learn how to decipher writing and eventually to write themselves. Each stage builds on what came before. Ensuring that children have adult caregivers who consistently engage in serve and return interaction, beginning in infancy, builds a foundation in the brain for all the learning, behavior, and health that follow.
Okay, the person next to you, what's the main thing that you take from that one? Okay, let's come back together. What's the main thing that you get from that? Now that a child is developing, what's really important in their development? Sorry? Modelling, yeah, that's part of what that is. They call it serve and return, but it's the basis of emotion coaching, which I'm going to talk a little bit about in a moment. It's the basis of how I engage and teach a young person how to make sense of what's happening for them. How do they understand their emotions? How do they understand their reality? Plus giving that message, modelling, also that they're worth something. It isn't just playing. It actually produces new connections. That's teaching a child how to learn, how to interact, and what they're worth. Last one, they're only 2-minute clips each. So this last one, and then we're going to move on to some parenting stuff.
Learning to deal with stress is an important part of healthy development. When experiencing stress, the stress response system is activated. The body and brain go on alert. There's an adrenaline rush, increased heart rate, and an increase in stress hormone levels. When the stress is relieved after a short time, or a young child receives support from caring adults, the stress response winds down and the body quickly returns to normal. In severe situations, such as ongoing abuse and neglect, where there is no caring adult to act as a buffer against the stress response stays activated. Even when there is no apparent physical harm, the extended absence of response from adults can activate the stress response system. Constant activation of the stress response overloads developing systems, with serious, lifelong consequences for the child. This is known as toxic stress. Over time, this results in a stress response system set permanently on high alert. In the areas of the brain dedicated to learning and reasoning, the neural connections that comprise brain architecture are weaker and fewer in number. Science shows that the prolonged activation of stress hormones in early childhood can actually reduce neural connections in these important areas of the brain at just the time when they should be growing new ones. Toxic stress can be avoided if we ensure that the environments in which children grow and develop are nurturing, stable, and engaging.
Okay, what have you come up with? Then we'll pull it all together. What have you come up with? That ongoing stressful situations for any of us isn't good. You know, we get too much cortisol pumped into our system. We get too many toxic chemicals in our brain. It impacts on memory and it impacts on how we can problem solve stuff. So we need to be very mindful of some of the environments in our own families. And sometimes we think that if we're arguing, it's not affecting our kids. Everybody argues, but I'm talking about the long-term stuff is going to have a big impact on our parenting. Now that we've just got a taste of some of this neural stuff, how does that then impact on our parenting? Because I think there's been a big overhaul. Parenting isn't about training up obedience, and it's not about kids doing the things that we tell them to do. Good parenting is about building relationship, and behaviour management is part of good parenting. But too many parenting programs are about how to control our kids' behaviour, and that's not the only thing there is to parenting. It certainly is a part of it, but so much more. Okay, so what do kids need? 4 things. Kids need love and security from us. This is number 1. But love isn't just about, coochie, you're so lovely, you're so wonderful, come and give me a hug. Love and security is number 1 about boundaries. Now, part of the problem with our boundary marking, and our kids don't know the rules. They're learning. They're little. They don't know. Their brain doesn't finish till they're 24. So they're trying to work out what the rules are. So they're going to push boundaries. Have any of us had kids push boundaries? We've told them so many times, why do I have to keep pushing these? Why do they keep pushing the boundaries? Now, part of the problem, if we keep giving in to our kids, if they hassle us and hound us enough, we say, no, yes, just leave me alone. That's called intermittent reinforcement. It does a few things. But if we say no, yes, then we're teaching our kids, number 1, that we're liars. That's not a good look for a parent. We're teaching our kids we're liars, but we're also teaching our kids that boundaries are flexible things, and that part of the way that you're supposed to function is that you push the boundaries till you find the real limit. Now, who's teaching them that? We are, or we can if we're not careful. Have you seen those children in supermarkets having like a tantrum on the floor? Like none of our children have ever done that, but those other families. Would you like to know how to do that? Next time you're babysitting, not your kids, would you like to produce that in a child? I'm just joking, don't really do it. It's really, really easy to do. Here's how you do it. Let's say on Monday you have to go to the shops and you need to buy a newspaper. And so you take your gorgeous little girl with you and she's the mum, can I have a lolly? No. Can I have a lolly? No. Can I have a lolly? No. Oh, okay, here's a lolly. Now, on Tuesday, now what happens with intermittent reinforcement? It increases persistence 7-fold. So says our social psychologist. So say that was about 1 minute's worth of badgering. So on Tuesday, you have to go down to the shops to buy some milk. And you take your gorgeous little girl with you. Now she's, Mum, can I have a lolly? No. Can I have a lolly? No. Can I have a lolly? No. Can I have a lolly? And she's going on for 7, nearly 10 minutes. And you're shoving lollies down her throat. Just stop it. How embarrassing. Oh, must be a father. Anyway, the next day, on the Wednesday, you need to buy a loaf of bread. Yes. Okay, I will take my gorgeous little girl with me. Now, remember, intermittent reinforcement increases persistence 7-fold. So let's round it up to say it was 10 minutes. And now on Wednesday, she's committed for 70 minutes to hound and badger and persist and demand. On Thursday, you think, I really need to go to the shops to post a letter. And you say to your husband, honey, do you want to take our daughter down to the shops with you? No, I'm joking. Look, now that's how you can do it. In 3 days, we now have created this tantruming monster on the floor. Is that their fault? Where did they learn that? Who taught them? We did. Now, this is part of the problem when it's yes, yes, no. Yes, yes, no. Yes, 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 no. Or no, sorry. No, 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 no. Yes. No, no, no. Yes. No, yes, no, no, no. Our kids are learning that they're supposed to push the boundaries, that that's how the world works, and that mum and dad don't tell the truth anyway. No, we need to let our yes be yes and our no be no. There needs to be some flexibility. You know, say bedtime's normally 7 o'clock, but you're out at a barbecue, so now you get home and it's 9 o'clock. Of course there's some flexibility. I'm talking about, lollies every time they demand it, new video games whenever they want it, staying up late just because. We need to put clear boundaries in. But when we dilute those rules, a rule is a rule, and if it isn't a rule, it's not a rule, like it is or it isn't. We need to be very mindful of what we're teaching our kids. And security as well. So boundaries give our kids a good sense of security. Now, the other thing with that, we need to have mums and dads on the same page. So we don't have mum saying no and dad saying yes, or dad saying no and mum saying yes, because that's going to teach our kids with very active right brains how to manipulate the system. And who's teaching them? We are. Mums and dads need to agree on what the parenting strategies are. You need to be the executive unit. You are the peak body in your family. You have the power. Too often we think that our little 4-year-old has the power. They don't. They don't. We do. But sometimes we give that to the child. Yes?
How would bargaining fit in with the whole no, yes thing? So what would happen with our daughter is she'd say, no, okay, you can be quiet for the next 10 minutes.
I think if you've set that rule in the beginning, this is the rule, honey, we're going to let you stay up or whatever it is. But if she's now negotiating, if she's the boss, she's being the parentified child and she's telling you what to do, no, it's not necessarily a good thing. But we need to be careful. We're going to talk a little bit about that too. Our kids really need that security so that they know where they sit. Otherwise, I have a 10-year-old child coming to see me, and mum and dad had some terrible things going on, and so she definitely became a parentified child, mum's best friend, all of the personal information going to the 10-year-old. So mum's bringing the 10-year-old now because mum won't tell her what mum and dad are doing. How dare mum have secret conversations? What did dad just say to you? Etc., etc. Mum, this 10-year-old is the boss in the family. And so we're trying to shift that, which of course we can, but mum's finding it really difficult to cope because she's just been given too much latitude, and very understandable because of a horrible situation. So we're just reining that back in. So kids are too young to be in charge of that power. Can I have chocolate for dinner? Okay. They don't see although, if you cut chocolate really small, there's no calories, so it's probably okay anyway. No, joking. Sorry, a question? No. You were just waving at me. Okay. Okay, so the other thing with security, there's something called circle of security. Now, this is the opposite of that drone dad, helicopter mum. We need to have two things. Our kids really need a secure base. They know you're there. They know you've got their back, so kids can go out and explore the world. We need to be allowing them to play with their friends or play in preschool or go and try these new things at whatever age is appropriate. But we're there. And our kids know that we're watching over them, we're delighting in them, we've got their back. They feel secure so they can go out and start exploring the world. Now, that's really important. They also need to know that they have safe haven. We're delighting and watching. If something happens, we'll step in. They know that they can come to us and we're not, look, just give me a minute. I'm just talking. Look, just go outside and leave me alone. Our kids need this secure base and safe haven. That's how they can explore the world. And when we see this safe haven, one of the ones is organise my feelings. That's back to that serve and return. If they're tantruming or they're scared or they saw a big dog, instead of just going, oh, don't be ridiculous, it's just a puppy dog. That's teaching our kids that they're not important and there are scary things out there in the world and they just have to deal with their fear and terror. That's going to promote anxiety. Don't do that. There's a scene in one of the Jurassic Park movies where a dinosaur walks past the child's window and the child goes into mum and dad and says, I just saw a dinosaur. Oh, don't be ridiculous. Go back to bed. We don't want to be dismissing our kids' fears. Sometimes we need to talk to them. We're going to talk about that. But we need to help them organise their emotions. They need us to do that. Otherwise, that big scary dog can now create a lifelong phobia that someone at 40 is coming to see me in counselling for because of a scary dog when they were a little child. And how did they cope with it? By avoiding the dog, because mum and dad just told them they were stupid and they just had to deal with it. And so they just had to hide that fear. But of course, if it's not addressed, it just gets bigger and bigger and bigger. So we need to help our kids work out how they're feeling and what does that mean. So this circle of security, really important for security. So there's a secure base. Mum and dad have got my back. It's that stuff that builds resilience, that second point of people caring about me and the safe haven that I can run to you. So the golden rule in this, and it's all about being connected, it's kind of labour and time intensive. Are your kids worth your time? It's labour and time intensive. We need to be bigger, stronger, wiser, and always kind with our kids. We need to be calm. We need to be big and strong. Come into my arms, you're safe. Let's talk about what's going on for you. This is really effective in laying the foundation then for that good behaviour management stuff. If I'm building relationship and helping my child develop skills to deal with life, I'm going to have less tantrums. You're not going to have no tantrums, but you're going to have less. So let's go back. The second one is praise and recognition. Now, we're in the throes of the positive psychology movement and everything's strength-based and lots of praise. Kids know when you're just, everyone can't get the trophy. Everyone can't come first. What's really important that our kids get praise and recognition for valid and real things. We need to work hard to praise our kids up for stuff that they've done well. For instance, thank you for bringing the shopping in with me. Thanks, honey, for getting the clothes in off the line. We need to be thanking our kids for genuine and real things, not just the self-centred achievements. We need to be acknowledging, recognising, identifying whatever is good, whatever they're doing that's positive, and not just the great big accolades. Celebrate those things as well, but remember to say thank you and well done. And thanks for helping your brother bringing the washing in. Research done in America looked at all of the drug prevention programs known to social research. And they found the thing that outstandingly produced drug-proof kids and kept them out of crime was praise and recognition in their own home, was praise and recognition from their parents, was the most powerful thing to keep our kids away from crime. Oh my goodness. And that's free. And they don't even have to go to a program out there. So connecting with our kids, this isn't just wishy-washy stuff. You can change the trajectory of your child's life. So praise and recognition, but for real things. Because if we're pushing our kids to come first or get in that soccer team or whatever it is, and then they don't, instead of giving them praise, all we have is disappointment. We roll our eyes. Oh, well, try again next year. Some of our kids have had some very good academic achievements. Some of our kids haven't. At the end of every year in school, we would take our kids out to celebrate finishing a year at school and celebrating everyone for what they'd achieved that year. And if someone got a trophy or an award, everyone would recognise that. But then going out for dinner, we all celebrated what we'd achieved. Phew, we got through another year. Well, second class was great. Gosh, you did well in year 6. And that was really important. When I was growing up, I was the academic one in my family. My 3 siblings weren't. So my parents had this ridiculous idea. If you came first in any subject, you get $5. I actually made quite a bit of money. My siblings hated me because they made none. And that was a really big issue that we had to resolve once we'd all grown up. Because as kids, you don't realise the impact that's having on each other. So that taught me to celebrate the person, to celebrate that they went to school, to celebrate that they care for each other, to celebrate that they can celebrate their siblings' award. So praise and recognition for real things that matter, not just for getting that trophy. Because, some of us in this room have never got a trophy. Does that make us any less than? So we want to teach our kids what's important. The third thing that our kids need is new experiences. New experiences has been described as the building blocks of good mental health, because every time we experience something new, we're growing new dendrites. That brain development? When we're learning something new, it's forcing new cables and connections, literally. As we're all sitting here, all our brains are changing a little bit. They're all shifting a bit. If we're uploading new information, there's growth and change happening in our head. Our kids need that at a young age. The problem in our culture is we think new experiences is about dancing, soccer, netball, tennis, whatever those things are. New experiences can include learning how to weed the garden, watering the plants, being responsible to feed the dog, going and visiting the old people's home, helping out at Vincent de Paul in the soup kitchen sometimes, visiting in the kids' home, etc., whatever it might be. But these new experiences have to be more than the experience that tells kids that they're the most important thing and mum and dad are the hired help, which I think a lot of our kids, possibly none of ours, but a lot of kids in this culture, they've all got iPhones. My kids think it's hilarious that we had one phone in our house, one of those dial ones, and everyone had a queue to talk to someone, and you can only be on the phone for 10 minutes because I'm one of 3 girls and a brother. And so we just had this one little phone, hilarious. But now our kids, they're connected to the whole world. And so we need to be also mindful of the new experiences of the internet. And we have to watch that. And Facebook, and our kids are online, and our kids, that's a whole other talk. But our kids need new experiences, and we need to help them to be able to develop a diversity of things that aren't just telling them that they're the most important person. New experiences, doing dishes, washing their clothes, etc. It feeds into the fourth one, responsibility. Lazy kids are not happy kids. They're not. Kids need to have jobs. When do they start jobs? Basically, when they can walk. Clean your toys up, let's pack it up, put it away, don't get anything else out until we put this away. Make your bed. Yes, every day you've got to make your bed. Our youngest son, they actually went on the job roster when they started school. So Nathan, silly boy, I want to be on the job roster. I want jobs. And the other kids are going, oh, no, you don't. So the day that he started school, he went on the job roster. And we had set the table, clear the table, wash the dishes. We didn't have a dishwasher then. Wash the dishes, dry the dishes, sweep the floor, vacuum the lounge room. Everyone had 2 jobs. And Nathan was halfway through washing the plastics. That was his job, standing on a stool. And he went, I don't need jobs anymore. I think I'm finished. And it was, no, this is just the beginning. But our kids need responsibility. Our kids all had to wash their own clothes as soon as they hit high school. They were responsible for their own laundry. And that was challenging sometimes because Nathan, our youngest, if he only had a few clothes to wash, there's no way I'm putting that in with Sarah's clothes because, she's got bras in there. I don't want my clothes touching her bras. So some of that was challenging just for water usage, etc. But our kids, they have to have responsibility. Because we're so time-starved, it's really easy for us to give our kids a bit of a job and then go, oh, look, let me do it myself. Really? Oh, you call that vacuuming? Just go away and do something else. We can make a rod for our own backs by just taking it over because we're so busy. We really need to train our kids up, and they need to have jobs that aren't connected to pocket money. You want to train up a mature, responsible young person, they need to have jobs in living in the household because nobody gives me pocket money for cleaning the toilet. And so our kids need to have this. It increases their sense of self-efficacy, their belief in themselves, their developing skills and ability, their worthwhileness increases. And we talked about that. So the goals of good parenting. We want to strengthen the relationship with our child. That's the number one goal. I want to strengthen the relationship with my child. I don't want to be their best friend, but I want to have a love bond that's unbreakable. So when the storms of life hit, they know they can come and talk to me. They know no matter what it is, they can come and talk to me. It's funny, one of my daughters years ago, she was in year 10 and she came to me, she's married now, she came to me and she said, "Oh, Mum, I really need to talk to you." So before she was about to go to school. And I said, "Yeah, sure, honey, of course. No, I need to talk to you in the bedroom." I went, "Yeah, of course, come in." And this was April, I forget, it was before Easter, I think it was April the 1st. Anyway, we're in the bedroom and I said, "Mum, I just need to tell you something." "What? You can tell me anything." She went, "Mum, I'm pregnant." And I said, "Honey, that is okay. We're going to get through this. Whatever we need to do, it's going to be all right." And she went, "April Fool, April Fool." Now, she felt, we still talk about it, she's 30 now, we still talk about it. She said she felt so guilty because I just took it so calmly and seriously, like I was ready to deal with whatever we had to deal with. Now, that's and I was really happy I had that response, even though inside I was, "Oh no, I didn't even know you had a boyfriend." Oh. So we need to be the first person that they come to. We want to have that communication open with our kids. It can save lives. I've seen a lot of kids, it's none of our kids. Well, I've seen, even ministers' kids who've had terminations at 16 because they can't tell their parents. Communication, we really need to work hard to keep the lines of communication open with our kids. So we want to strengthen the relationship with our kids because it's the foundation of everything in parenting. We want to encourage their good behaviour and we want to stop the bad behaviour. So I'm building bridges with you and now I'm thanking you and recognising when you've done, good things, and now I want to also be challenging the bad behaviour and putting those boundaries in place and consequences. Okay, it's to teach self-control, it's to teach responsibility, and it's teaching our children understanding of consequences for behaviour. Kids need to have consequential learning. It's really important for their development. We need to have clear boundaries, and mums and dads need to talk about what are the consequences. Don't ground kids from life for the rest of their life, but we need to have good boundaries. One of the things that was helpful for me when my kids were little was putting this consequential learning into practice. So often I was going, I'll count to 3 and then that's it. That's 1, 2, 2.5, 2 3/4, 2 9/10, 2 11/12. That's not helpful. It's useful to give our kids 3 warnings around consequences. So that gives them a chance to learn and grow. So consequential learning, one of our kids when they were little, Joel, the eldest, was picking on his sister Sarah. And Sarah was complaining and screaming, and it was, "Joel, leave your sister alone. Otherwise, if I have to come in here again, you have 3 chances." This is the first one. 3 chances we were going to McDonald's for lunch. You'll miss out on McDonald's. So I walked out of the room, started picking on her again. Sarah's grizzling and screaming, and I said, "Joel, this is your second warning. If I come in here once more, there's no McDonald's." As soon as I walked out of the room, they started fighting and squabbling, and I was, "No." And I walked into the room and I said, "That's it, Joel, there is no McDonald's for you for lunch." And I felt like the meanest mother in the universe. Joel looked up at me with his big brown eyes and he said, "Mom, I love you." And I said, "I love you too, but there's no McDonald's." Now, that was the beginning of rolling out this consequential learning. Now, of course, I didn't get it perfect, but our kids came to know that when I said this would be the consequence, that's what would happen. And so we also want to be seen that this is the chance. I'll give you a few chances. Violence, there's no chances. Violent behaviour, there's immediate consequence. But if kids are trying to learn the rules and the boundaries, they need a chance to learn. Mums and dads need to agree with what the consequences are. 6 kinds of testing and manipulation. Now, this is when we haven't had good boundaries. We're going to see some of this. We're going to have badgering till you finally say yes. Temper tantrums till you finally say yes. Threats, I'm going to run away from home, I'm going to kick the cat. Martyrdom, oh, that's okay, if I can't have any chocolate, I'll just go in the corner and die quietly. And the butter up, Mum, I love you so much, and then smashing things and breaking things. Now, this is part of that behaviour to get you to say yes. As your boundaries get clearer, you're going to see less of this. Yes, you will. As your boundaries get clearer, you can come and talk to me about it afterwards if you think, that won't work in my family. Once kids know what the rules are, because kids don't do it in other contexts, particularly in school classrooms, Kids can learn the rules. It's how we enforce that. Okay. Oh, I want to finish soon in case there's questions. Don't use put-downs and shame. Don't do that to your kids. Oh, you idiot, I can't believe you did that. Don't shame our kids. What would the neighbours think? I'm going to ring Grandma right now and tell her what you've done. Don't do that. Don't give our kids the message they're not worth anything. Don't compare. Why can't you be like your brother or your sister? Or, gosh, you're just like Uncle Fred and he's just got out of jail. Don't compare to anybody else. Our kids are who they are. Don't give contradictory messages. Don't be saying to your kids, will you stop shouting? Our messages need to be clear. Don't use guilt to control the kids. Your mother's going to have a heart attack if you keep that up. She's going to have a stroke. Your kids just better quieten down. Don't use fear or terror. I remember one time my dad, he was so cranky with us in the middle of the night. He woke us all up, he turned the TV on, he turned the radio on, he turned the stereo on, he turned every light in the house on to teach us a lesson for being so noisy when he was trying to go to sleep. And what did that teach us? I think Dad's having a breakdown. Where's Mum? He's crazy. Don't use fear and terror. It just teaches kids that you're a monster. And then when you calm down, the behaviour just continues. I have many parents who come in and say, the kids only listen when I yell and scream. Why can't they just do what they're told? It's not until I'm screaming at them. Now, why is that changing the behaviour? Because you're terrifying them. Uh-oh, Mum's gone psycho again. We'll just wait till she calms down. Okay, she's good. Right, let's keep playing. Woo, drawing on the wall, yay. So what we need, don't get cranky with our kids. They need good boundaries. They need consequences. They need calm parenting. Calm parenting to the best of your ability. Do not raise your voice. To the best of your ability, state it calmly and clearly. Even if kids are, well, I don't care what the consequence is. If you were pulled over by a policeman because you went through a red light and you said to him, well, I don't care, he's not really going to care either, but the consequence is still there. Even if our kids are saying they don't care, remember, discipline isn't to hurt our children. It's not to get revenge, no matter how much I'm sure it's none of us, no matter how much some parents want revenge. It's about teaching our kids. It's about giving our kids lessons of how to live well and grow up to be a good person. That's the whole point of parenting. Don't use anger. We've just said that. Now, I want to finish on this. These are some useful strategies, and it's based in all that neuroscience stuff. The first two strategies, connect and redirect, recognise the fact that we've got left and right hemisphere. And our right hemisphere is emotion, and our left hemisphere is logic. Now, when we have an emotional reaction to anything, some of us in this room might have been emotional or got cranky with our partner or someone. And we can have something called a right brain flood. And a right brain flood is like a tantrum. And don't you understand? And this is not fair. Now, by saying to our kids, by going right brain to right brain, that's called war, don't you speak to me like that. Yeah, well, don't you speak to me like, I'm sick of this behaviour. I hate you, Mum. Get in your room. That's not helpful. Probably none of us have ever had that encounter, but it does happen out there. So when our child has a right brain flood and all of this emotion is happening and they're cranky about whatever they're cranky about, the dog licked their ice cream, or they don't want to go to bed without their teddy bear but they left Teddy at Nana's house. This is that emotion coaching. In that circle of security, it talks about help them understand their emotions. What we need to do is connect with the right brain. I understand that this is really upsetting for you. I know that you really wish that you had your cuddly teddy bear with you, but we've left it at Nana's house. That must make you really upset. That would make me upset too. Now, I know some of you are going to sit there and go, really? As if that would make a difference? Well, you know what? That's called empathy. Empathy is the basis of every human relationship. Empathy is one of the core things I use in my job to build bridges with people and to help people overcome adversity and to make sense of life experience. What we're doing is teaching our kids, and it's not going to happen overnight. You're not going to say, gosh, I know that's really hard, and then your child is, yay, everything's fantastic. It's not going to be like that. But it's an empathic response. It's helping our kids make sense of their emotion. So the right brain connect is help the child to understand what's happening. Then we do the left brain, the logic. We don't have the teddy bear, so you're just going to have to go to bed. What other toy would you like to cuddle instead? I know it's really sad, but we can't do anything about it till tomorrow. That's when we can make those statements. We need to connect. One thing that empathy does, it's in counselling, it's a de-escalation tool. It helps people to calm down. Because once people in my room know that they're being heard, suddenly they're feeling understood, I'm on their page, their tantrum starts to calm down. Now, I encourage everyone to do this, to try this with your children. So we want to connect and redirect. The second one is name it to tame it. Now, this one is about, remember that trauma is what trauma is to the person. So when our kids have a bad experience, someone at school took their pencil, or they didn't colour in the lines, or they've lost something, it's really important to let them tell their story. Now, sometimes there might be a situation where there was a car accident and someone goes off in an ambulance, and we think it's good to just distract our kids and let's not talk about it. No, it really helps our kids to tell the story. Someone's riding their bike and they fall off, and then they cut their knee, and then someone helps them and they come home. It's really good. So what happened when you were riding your bike? Oh, you hit a bump. Oh, what happened when you hit the bump? I fell off and it was really scary. Oh, it sounds like it was scary. What happened when you fell off? Well, then I cut my knee. Oh, you poor thing. Oh, and it's really sore, but I've got a Mickey Mouse Band-Aid so it feels better. Oh, that's really good. So tell me about that nice, etc., etc. Now, it seems tedious and it's labour intensive. Guess what this is? It's called trauma counselling. Now, and that's what I do in my job. The very best strategy where there's trauma or difficulty is to let the person talk. Now, that's what we do with our kids. It gives the sense that they matter. It helps them to make sense of their world. And instead of the potency of that scary dog growing into an adult phobia, if that little person had the person they could talk to about how scary a big dog was, or the scary siren, or whatever their life experience was, it helps our kids to manage and make sense of life. So the connect and redirect, when there's a right brain flood, let's talk about that. Let's acknowledge it, empathically connect with it, and then help our kids to understand, well, this is what we can do with the situation. The name it to tame it, whatever it is, let's take a little bit of time and talk to our kids. In trauma counselling, sometimes people need to tell their story a few times. It's easy for us as busy parents to just say, go away, don't be silly, that's nothing. It was just a siren. It's just a branch on the window, it's not a monster, don't be ridiculous. We actually need to talk with our kids. 5 minutes sometimes is quite enough. The second 2, 3 and 4, our brain is also divided here. From about here down, we've got something called our primitive brain, which is where all our automatic responses are. It's like if a cockroach jumped on your leg, your little amygdala is going to have its automatic response. It's like the gatekeeper in our brain. The top part of the brain, this is our prefrontal cortex. It's where we do our problem solving and we think about things. So with the third one, when kids they're enraging, they're having this really big reaction to something. Now they're having this big tantrum because they can't do whatever, they can't go to the girlfriend's party, they can't watch the movie. Rather than getting into that warfare, what we actually want to try and do is talk to them. We'll do our connect and redirect and start talking to them about, how can you solve this? What's a better way to talk to me? Can you present your argument? What happens if you don't go to the party? We want to help our kids to go from enraged, don't do warfare. Now, there's 2 types of tantrums. One is the tantrum that's happening, the automatic response, and they're not tapped into their thinking brain upstairs. And so they also have the other one, which is a tantrum where they know exactly what they're doing. They're trying to manipulate you. So the first tantrum, don't engage with that. You never negotiate with a terrorist. Like, that they're manipulating you. They're having their tantrum to try and get you to give in. The other tantrum, that then they're just freaking out. Now, when your child is offline, when it's like you can't reach them, that's where we need to, honey, what can I do for you? What do you need? What else do you need to say? You just cry and scream a bit more. When you're ready, you can talk to me and sit there with them. That sounds like an odd strategy, but it helps that that rage response. Now we see adults who haven't learned how to manage that. When they have grandma in the street, cuts them off in the traffic, and now they chase grandma waving a tire iron. You know, they're having their tantrum, their lower brain tantrum, because they haven't learned how to engage their thinking process. How do I problem solve this? What does this really mean? The last one is use it or lose it. Really important parenting strategy is taking time to talk to your kids about morality, the meaning of life, you know, what they thought about that show on TV, to actually help them to start using their thinking and their logic. You know, we want to use this rather than lose it with having a tantrum. I've said a lot of things tonight, and I don't know if there's any questions. Maybe everyone just wants to run home. But are there any questions? I've left some space in case there's any comments. Yes.